Dr. Andrew Linklater admits Freddie.
On our physical examination, there wasn't really much that we could detect on the outside, which is a very common problem that we face with all sorts of exotic species, particularly hard-shelled animals like tortoises. And that's when we have to say, you know what, we need to look inside your animal with blood work, with x-rays.
Desperate to know what's wrong with their beloved pet, Freddie's owners agree to the procedures.
The x-rays of Freddie were actually quite stunning. We can see quite clearly that there's a large number of screws and rocks inside Freddie's gastrointestinal system. It was definitely something that could potentially explain all of the signs that we were seeing in Freddie.
Looking back, you can see, oh, yeah, he was over in that area, and there were screws there because we had construction done on our house. We just didn't have a clue, and I felt terrible.
Freddie was actually in quite a bit of danger from these materials. They're sharp, they have a lot of edges on them. They can poke through the intestines and cause a life-threatening infection.
But the x-ray isn't the only thing that concerns Dr. Linklater. It appears Freddie's developed a bruise on his neck where they drew blood, a sign the tortoise's blood is not clotting properly.
During surgery, we're cutting structures open. If an animal is not able to clot their blood normally, they can essentially bleed to death.
In order to proceed with the surgery, Freddie first needs a blood transfusion, something that has never been done before on a tortoise.
Elise was scared, and I was scared too, but I wanted him to live. There was no other option. He was having surgery.
The staff plans to move forward with the blood transfusion, but they face a huge hurdle. They have to find African spurred tortoise blood donors.
In the area, we're all very familiar with a particular pet store named Hoffer's.
I called Mike at Hoffer's, and I said, I have a really strange request. We'd like to get some tortoise blood because our tortoise needs surgery. Mike said, of course. And so we went and we picked up the tortoises.
We have never had donor tortoises before, so we need to make sure that they're healthy animals. The blood donation actually went very well. They were all very cooperative patients.
It's not known if tortoises have different blood types, so the staff runs a cross-match procedure, a sort of test run before the transfusion.
We take red blood cells and plasma or serum from the donor and from the recipient, and in the laboratory, look at them under a microscope and make sure that there's not a reaction that's going to occur that we can detect as much beforehand.
And it looks like a match. Now it's time to get the blood to the patient.
We have to administer it at the beginning very slowly, and we watch their vital signs very carefully, their heart rate. Respiratory rate's a little bit of a challenge to do in a tortoise. When we had administered the blood transfusion to Freddie, he did very well with it.
But Dr. Linklater won't know until he cuts Freddie open whether the blood transfusion is a success.
Fred's part of my family, so I was crying on the way out, you know, not knowing if we were going to see him alive or not.
Taking a foreign body out of a dog or a cat is a very routine procedure for us, but doing it on a tortoise is a whole different ballgame. The most terrifying moment is the anesthesia, because it's the thing that can result in Freddie passing away.
There's no easy way to measure the depth of anesthesia needed for a tortoise, but the vet has no choice but to move forward with the surgery.
We make a four-sided incision through the underside of his shell. We move it out of the way. All tortoises, it's actually very difficult to exteriorize those organs because they're kind of fixed inside of them. So we have to make a rather large cut in their shell. But once we do that, we can examine all of their internal organs and make sure that they're looking relatively normal. We had to make a couple of incisions into his intestines and into his stomach to remove the foreign objects that we could feel.
All in all, Dr. Linklater pulls out 7 screws, a piece of glass, 42 pebbles, a piece of caulk, and a staple. Because Freddie isn't bleeding profusely, the doctor knows the transfusion is a success.
The next difficult portion for any tortoise and for Freddie is to put that bone piece, that shell, back in place. Essentially, we need to use a resin or a wax or a glue to keep that in place for an extended period of time. It takes a long time for those things to heal, just like bone.